Psychologist Matthias Desmet argues that there is a type of totalitarianism that is rooted in a mass formation process that has the following characteristics: a willingness of individuals to sacrifice their own personal interests out of solidarity with the masses, an acceptance of pseudo-scientific indoctrination and propaganda, and rejection of dissident voices. With this mass formation process, individuals lack an ethical self-awareness and the ability to think critically. In the film The Hunger Games, one sees propaganda and indoctrination and fear backed by brute force. Although the elite living at the capital represent a collective that supports totalitarian control, in the districts there are signs of ethical self-awareness. Initially, this awareness is muted, but the character Katniss emerges as someone willing to be a dissenting voice that challenges the system. In George Orwell's novel, 1984, the inner party member O'Brien declares, "There will be no curiosity, no enjoyment of the process of life. All competing pleasures will be destroyed, but always, do not forget this, Winston, always there will be the intoxication of power, constantly increasing and constantly growing subtler. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want to picture the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever." End of quote. Dehumanization is the now and future. Power is intoxicating, and there are people who seek it, including politicians with no special skills that set them apart other than a determination to gain and hold political office. Many politicians who gain power are lawyers who are trained to bend the truth to reach their objectives. Scholar Keith Booker writes that if dystopian literature functions in a sense as social criticism, it is also true that such literature gains its principal energies precisely from its literariness, from its ability to illuminate social and political issues from an angle not available to conventional critics. With the constraints of censorship hindering political action, fiction can do much to identify and potentially correct a wrong. With its powerful images, film is especially effective in swaying people to support an agenda. Filmmakers have taken dystopian literature and offered thought-provoking material on totalitarian life. The Hunger Games is based on the novel of the same name written by Suzanne Collins. The story is political and brutal with some features similar to the Roman Empire. The actual graphic violence is minimal for a story of teenagers fighting to the death with only one survivor. However, the idea of such a competition embraced by elite adults screams brutality and soullessness. Orwell's 1984 influenced Suzanne Collins. In both 1984 and The Hunger Games, the government manipulates language and brutalizes citizens to keep them submissive. The novels depict violent brutality, the use of nuclear weapons, impersonalized place names, and a government that manipulates people to hate those whom they originally loved. Stanley Kubrick's film Spartacus is another that had an impact on Collins' thinking. The slave Spartacus leads an extended uprising against the Roman Republic, soon to be on its last legs. Scholar Roberta Salinger-Trites notes that the film has almost a dystopic setting in the way that a totalitarian government controls every aspect of daily life. One character even acknowledges that there are more slaves in Rome than Romans, just as the citizens of the districts in Panem outnumber the citizens of the capital. Collins points out that there's a basis for the war, historically in the Hunger Games, which would be the Third Servile War, which was Spartacus' war, where you have a man who was a slave who was then turned into a gladiator, who broke out of gladiator school and led a rebellion, then became the face of the war. So there is historical precedent for the arc for a character. In the film Spartacus, the slave rebellion fails, but the Romans promise clemency to all the slaves if they identify their leader. Instead of doing so, one man after another loyally stands to make the false claim, "I am Spartacus." To punish their loyalty, Crassus has all 6,000 crucified, Spartacus last of all. He has led his men in a doomed rebellion because he believes that the only form of freedom available to a slave is death. He says, all men die, but a slave and a free man lose different things. When a free man dies, he loses the pleasure of life. A slave loses his pain. Death is the only freedom as a slave knows. That's why we'll win. Later, Spartacus redefines what he means. Just by fighting them, we won something. When just one man says, "No, I won't," Rome begins to fear. We were tens of thousands who said no. A Spartacus or dissident voice puts a corrupt government on notice. Rebellion is justified. We see this in the Hunger Games. Suzanne Collins' father was a military historian who taught at West Point Academy and encouraged his children to study history to make sense of the world. Suzanne studied Greek and Roman histories. The more she read, the better sense multiple interpretations guided her closer to the truth. In a 2008 interview, she states the sociopolitical overtones of the Hunger Games were intentionally created to characterize current and past world events, including the use of hunger as a weapon to control populations. Tyrannical governments have always used techniques of geographical containment of certain populations, as well as complete elimination of the rights of the individual. In the novel, the annual Hunger Games themselves are a power tool used as a reminder of who is in charge and what will happen to citizens who don't capitulate. Communists in history were brutally effective in using hunger and show trials to control citizens, the best examples being Stalin's USSR and Mao's China. The Hunger Games tells the story of Panem, that once was North America before a catastrophic civil war destroyed society. Panem has 12 districts under the control of the capital, home of the totalitarian government where President Snow has dictatorial power. Each of the 12 districts must send 2 young people every year to the televised Hunger Games tournament. The 24 young tributes fight as a symbolic act of penance for rebellious actions of the past. For the elites in the capital, this event is a way to knit us all together. End of quote. This points to statism, where the individual must serve the state first. Nazi Germany stripped away individual freedom in the home and workplace. For example, in Germany, the National Socialists prohibited free market capitalism. In other words, the government controlled the economy, telling employers what they must do and informing workers where they must work. For Collins, the foundation of the Hunger Games is history, where Christianity was pushed aside, as we can see in communist regimes and in the National Socialism of Nazi Germany. At the beginning of the film, the close friends Gail and Katniss discuss the Hunger Games. Gale wondered how different things would be if people did not watch and thus support the televised Hunger Games. However, the people cannot turn away from their screens. The government continues to control what the people see. They are in control. Government control of media is something that citizens experience in modern Western nations today. Political control of news, however, is subtle, and people often do not realize that the leaders they vote for do not necessarily have their best interests. In the Hunger Games, the importance of District 12 is coal mining. The capital expropriates District 12's coal from the people. One of the more depressed areas of Panem, life there is grimy and difficult. The scenes of poverty and despair of the coal miners reflect the despair of thinking. The government rules the body and the mind. For District 12, Primrose is the female tribute selected by way of the lottery. Her earlier nightmare appears to become a reality until Katniss, her older sister, protects Primrose by taking her place for the competition. She is a young woman of action. To help feed her family, Katniss illegally hunts for food with her bow and arrows. The male tribute selected is Peeta, who secretly cares for Katniss. Once at the capital, Katniss and Peeta receive information from Haymitch, who was wise about gladiatorial combat and the system of sponsorship. He explains to the couple the strategy of marketing and becoming popular with the masses. The combatants face the threat of exposure, dehydration, and starvation. Assistance from a sympathetic audience was crucial. For the television audience, Katniss and Peeta act as a romantic couple. This delusion reflects the way, many ways, media manipulates and shapes what and how people think, including today. The scenes of the Capitol are mainly on the training of the tributes, but viewers see a rather Spartan city. Socialist scholar Mark Fisher explains that commodities are ubiquitous. There's no corporate logos, shops, or brand names in the city. So far as we can see, the state, under the beady gaze of President Snow, seems to own everything. It exerts its power directly via an authoritarian police force of white uniformed peacekeepers, which inflicts punishment similarly and symbolically through the Hunger Games and other rituals in which the districts are required to demonstrate their subordination. Again, protest is difficult because Snow controls the media. It is important to distract people from their misery and bombard them with slogans on what their duties are. You are to do this or that for the safety and well-being of others, even though there is no proof offered that the policies are good. The physical training of Katniss and Peeta ends with Katniss receiving top marks for her archery skills and her bold act of shooting an arrow at a party of elites who had ignored her demonstration. When Katniss and Peeta look to be the potential winners, the game maker alters the rules. First, there is the announcement that there will be 2 winners, then only 1, and finally a return to 2 winners when Katniss and Peeta decide to both eat a handful of deadly berries and thus thwart the designs of the government. Before they consume the deadly berries, the games maker makes it clear that both can actually be victors. So the 2 tributes provide signs of a revolutionary consciousness. To what point they and the previous other tributes have been caught in a web of fatalism. They were slaves to the dominant capital that controls people's lives. Even the tributes show no ambition to resort to revolution, nor did Katniss plan revolution before her emergence as a tribute. The government has the power to torture and kill any family. In Panem, the rich people live at the capital. The masses in the districts have no or little chance to better their lives. However, those tributes who are victorious in the Hunger Games become famous. They're well taken care of. The victor's job at the Capitol is to mentor future tributes, although this does not necessarily mean a better life. According to scholar James Keller, the tribute wins more luxury and liberty, but ensures the continued suppression of the masses while simultaneously encouraging the audience to believe in the possibility of release from the oppressive control of the centralized government. Haymitch deals with this gloomy situation by drinking excessive alcohol. The Hunger Games arena, in which teenagers are forced to compete with each other for the entertainment of a bored elite, is as horribly compelling an image of the privation of solidarity in our world as you could wish for. Elite adults offer a brutal world for children. There are powerful scenes where President Snow explains what is at stake for his government. Early in the film, he declares, "War, terrible war, widows, orphans, a motherless child." This was the uprising that rocked our land. The 13 districts rebelled against the country that fed them, loved them, protected them. Brother turned on brother until nothing remained. And then came the peace, hard fought, sorely won. A people rose up from the ashes and a new era was born. Both freedom has a cost. When the traitors were defeated, we swore as a nation we would never know that this treason again. And so it was decreed that each year the various districts of Panem would offer up in tribute one young man and woman to fight to the death in a pageant of honor, courage, and sacrifice. The lone victor, bathed in riches, would serve as a reminder of our generosity and our forgiveness. This is how we remember our past. This is how we safeguard our future. End of quote. So there must be no treason. There can be no protest, even if it is a protest of government policies that are not safe for people. Snow and his elites know better what is best for the people. Later in the film, Snow warns the head game maker, Seneca Crane, about Katniss and her actions. Seneca is impressed by her shooting skills, but Snow only says that she came close to shooting the games maker in the head. Then he says what they're really talking about, limiting any challenge to their power. A tiny quantity of hope might grow to a major problem. Snow asks Seneca, "Why do you think we have a winner?" Seneca is unsure. "What do you mean?" Snow adds, "I mean, why do we have a winner? I mean, if we just wanted to intimidate the district, why not round up 24 of them at random and execute them all at once? Be a lot faster." Seneca is confused. Snow explains, "Hope is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot is dangerous. A spark is fine as long as it's contained." Seneca's order was to contain it. When Katniss and Peeta did not bend the knee to the game maker's script, they entered dangerous territory. As Haymitch explained later, they don't take these things lightly. In history, one sees dictatorial control by way of fear. Joseph Stalin, Mao, and other communists created a climate of fear amongst the population. But so-called democratic leaders can also bring the hammer down. Absent is the murderous brutality of Stalin, but there can be nonviolent government actions that meet the objectives of a political elite. In recent years, we have witnessed governments controlling media and freezing bank accounts of citizens who challenge government policies. Dystopia films are valuable for us and helps us to think outside the box and ask questions on whether a government crosses the line on issues of individual liberty. The Hunger Games reveals that freedom is not free. Political elites do not grant it freely. Thank you.